Everyone, welcome to this new session of the International Macro History Online Seminar. It's my great pleasure today to chair this session. I am Maylis Avaro from the University of Pennsylvania. And today we are going to listen to the paper entitled The Long-Run Unintended Consequence of the Arsenal Democracy. It's a paper jointly written by Professor Juan Flores, who will be giving the talk, and his co-author are Alexandra Cermeño from Lund and Alexandra Klein from the University of Sussex. Maybe just a word on Professor Rosés' foremost work. He's Professor of Economic History at the London School of Economics, working on historical economic geography, long-term economic growth. He co-authored a book about the Great Influenza pandemic in 2022 and edited a book on economic development of Europe's region in 2028. But today we are looking at the history of the US. So the format will be the following. Professor Flores will give a 40-minute presentation. I encourage everyone in the room to type your question in the Q&A box that you can find at the bottom of your screen. If you have any clarification question that you would like to be asked during the talk, please flag your question with the hashtag clarification, and I may interrupt Professor Rosés to ask the question. Otherwise, we'll save the question for the Q&A part of the seminar. Will be after the 40-minute presentation. So there will be 20 minutes for question, and we will have an additional 15 minutes of a more informal discussion with the author at the end. So I will now give the floor to Professor Rosés for his presentation. Thank you.
Hello. Can you share my screen?
Yes, perfect.
Yeah, one moment. What happened here? 1 second. Good. Welcome to everybody. Thanks for coming. Thanks for inviting me. This is a joint paper with Sandra and Alex. As usual, they are the responsible for any error that you found in the paper. I only here to explain something. Basically, the paper is an historical economic geography paper, and you should interpret it this way. And the questions are questions of historical economic geography. Basically, what we want to look is at the impact of the enormous expenditure that the United States make during World War II in regional economic growth. Then I will show later that this is a really very challenging question in terms of methodology. And part of the contribution of the paper, or a big contribution of the paper, is to try to discover or to present a new methodology to solve the endogeneity problems that has this question. Okay? This is what we will make a short introduction about what is the arsenal of democracy, why we call it this way. Later, I will talk about the motivation, why we should study this. Later, I will stay a lot of time talking about the methodology, how we will approach to this analysis, what are the things that we contribute here, then go further from the paper. Finally, we will look at the preliminary findings, are no longer preliminary because we have been working on this for 3 years. I think that we have some big settlement, what really happened. And later we have some discussion of the implications in terms of economic history of this, okay? What is the arsenal of democracy? Why this strange name, where it come from, and so on, is very interesting. Is from one very famous, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, the president of the United States, was very famous to talk a lot in the radio. And in one moment, he said this famous discourse, and is reproduced in many places, and say the arsenal of democracy is what we will do for the world, because we are in the World War II. Okay, basically the arsenal of democracy is, in every sense, the most impressive government expenditure project in economic history. I don't feel that there are many similar projects. Basically, in very few years, from 1940s to 1945, the United States passed from being a free market economy to quasi a kind of quasi-common economy, a kind of, if you allow me, a socialist economy. Public expenditure multiplied by 4, as from 10% of the GDP to 40%. They basically eliminate unemployment to below 2%, not only because the people go to fighting, but also because the people begin to work in this new production, and the GDP per head grows at 67% during this year, okay? That is impressive. And basically, good news for economic historians is that, contrary to what the British people do, because I tried to get the British data, but it seems that the British don't record. The Americans published this very nice book where they published every expenditure, where was the money spent. Basically, it's a government contract, okay? And this means they provide where the plan, who was the company, where the facility was located, and is what interests us as historical econogeographers. What was the work product that they want to do, the capacity, where did the money come from, because sometimes was mixed public and private, and estimate the cost in thousands of dollars. This means that we have incredible data. What we do is to take this database, that is these books, that are book for is enormous, and we geolocate each investment, the estimated cost, and link it to industrial code. This means that we have a database, enormous database with investment in every county in the United States for every industrial code and how much dollars are. Another thing that we make is we collect this data that exists already for employment by county until 1980s, and we make a secondary contribution that is to link this data with the data that exists from 1980 to 2010. This is part of another contribution of the paper, because normally papers finish in 1980s or begin in 1980s. We create this new database. This means that we have county data from the census and the historical IPUMS data. And later we use a lot of controls, basically from Sandra paper on universities, okay? This means that we have this huge database, okay? Basically what we have is this enormous 30,231 investment in 36 industries in 1,032 locations. This is because what's impressive is, in every sense, is one of the huge government investments, cover basically a lot of places, many industries, and many locations. Okay, it's very important this, because this in fact is part of the big problem to evaluate this that is huge. Okay, the problem is that how we treat something that is huge. Okay, motivation. We should study this. What is the thing? We want not to study the intended consequence, but the unintended consequences of this. The intended consequences are very interesting. The government getting benefits from what happened in World War I, he wants to do two basic things. The first is win the war. And if you compare the enormous amount of production that the Americans are able to produce during World War II, basically they obstruct every country in the world in production of army goods. And basically they produce much more ships than the rest of the world together. They produce much more tanks, much more fighters, anything else. This was an incredible success. And the second part is to try to avoid something that happened in World War I, and is consumption shortage. This means that some of the production was not only to manufacturing tanks or aircrafts or new ships. Part of the money goes to produce what the main consumer goods. For example, some of the contracts are to produce canned tomatoes. Okay. One interesting thing, and a big problem for everybody, is that for everybody, not for the researchers, is that Paul Roth and co-authors discover that basically economic factors dominate the allocation of supply contracts more than political factors. This means that basically the contracts are endogenous because they want to win the war, and they resisted the typical pork-barrel politics or a loss of pork-barrel politics. This means that many of the contracts are endogenous. They produce the things in the best place that was possible to produce. They don't produce the things in crazy places, okay? What we want to do? We want to study the unintended consequences. What happened from these enormous public contracts, public investment? What was the impact of the American economy? The traditional approach that many people have taken, and I feel that is not very productive, is to take an aggregate approach basically to calculate the macroeconomic and fiscal stimulus, to calculate multipliers. For example, Vernon is positive. He says wartime fiscal stimulus pulled the country out of the Great Depression. There are a lot of people that say this is not true. Basically, what happened, an investment displaced private investment. They are crowding out. Production costs also went to pay transformation. A lot of the money was spent, for example, to convert a car factory in a tank factory, that is very expensive. And basically, many of these guys do, when the war finished, was useless and disappear, okay? And this is basically the debate between Higgs and the recent papers and the early papers is also a methodological problem. How do we measure something that lasts not a lot of months? And basically, we only have quarterly data. This means that multipliers are a lot dependent on the method and the assumptions. Recently, Phil has made this book showing that the aggregates, TFP, labor force, and so on also don't improve a lot during the war. This means basically, this is, if you want a summary, macroeconomic view is basically negative. This was a waste for long-run economic growth for the United States. But this is not the approach that we talk here. Another unintended consequence that is, was regional development produced by this? It's very interesting. There are a very forgotten book, paper, right, in a very not very popular economic history journal, not an economic history journal, in a journal of military, social military and economics. Then they say basically these two guys take the same data than us and show them, wow, this investment is an incredible regional policy and counties that has this investment grow faster. Much more recent, Cullen and Fishback found exactly the contrary, and then we have a short run effect, but in the long run, everything disappears. Basically, this is not a waste of money, but basically when you put the contracts, the thing disappear, don't have impact. Much more recently, Jaworski make another paper, very important paper about the south of the United States, and look that in the south, and is the poorest part of the state, this money don't conduct to the industrialization. In fact, the money don't change anything in the south. And this is the new paper, the Garin and Rothbaum, has been around from 21 and now is the last version. And I think that they have in some place in Revise and Resumit. It's a very important paper because they get, not very important. We are very happy with the paper because basically it's a complementary what we get. They use individuals, and what they discovered that individuals that live in counties where the arsenal of democracy, this big investment arrived, benefited from this investment in the long run because they basically move to new jobs and they educate themselves and they improve a lot. Okay, this is a different view. It's basically an economic historian view that in the long run this was very positive because change policies. As you can see, there are many different views about this, and not everybody agree on the consequence of this big government investment. Okay. Now I present a small map of the United States to look how big is this enormous investment. This is white is where you don't get money, and blue is where you get money. And dark blue, much more darker is you get much more money. There are huge difference, but obviously if you look, a lot of the money goes where one expect. Okay, a lot of the money goes to the manufacturing belt in the north, and a lot of the money go to California, a lot of the money go to Ohio, Normally, the money go to the normal places, but also the money go to different places, go to a lot of places. This means that many people get some money after all, okay? This means that it's a very enormous investment. If you, in the next map, we look at one of the top industries, that is aircraft production, is thousands of dollars. And you can see that this is different. There are a lot of places that benefit from this income, this investment, but not everybody benefit in the same amount. There are some places that get a lot of money that now are very famous. I don't know, Seattle and Boeing, and also is different. But there are also these many places get some money in some moment. Okay, basically this investment, this money is a contract with the government in a factory to produce something, and the government will give you the money and will buy the product at the end. Okay, this is a procurement money. Good. What is our contribution? What we want to do? First, we want, this paper is a paper about place-based policies. Basically, what we want to study, if this is money going to a certain place, produce or not economic growth. One of the contributions here is that we design a method that solves the problem of endogeneity, because here there are a lot of endogeneity. We need to do something about endogeneity. We cannot analyze the average contribution because basically it's biased, okay? One big problem for economic historians when we work in place-based policies is that normally we need a natural experiment that is exogenous. And basically what we present here is a way to approach to something that we know from the beginning that is endogenous by nature, okay? This means that this is also very much more close to what happened in the reality because normally governments don't invest in absolutely exogenous natural experiments. Normally governments tend to invest in something that they feel has some endogeneity, okay? And this is something that we look at here, and I think that is important, okay? We look something that normally tend to happen, and economic historians are, the importance of what we are doing is that we extend how much we can analyze, okay? Basically, we not only look our data set, we have a good news that the American data is incredible. This means that we have data not only by county, but also we have data by technology and by the type of investment. This means that we have something that is very powerful with a lot of observations, and we can work on this. But our main contribution is to explain to economic historians you can work when the things are endogenous, because this is a big problem. Methodology, that is a lot of our contribution. How we approach to the analysis, basically to repeat myself, we made 3 convenient methods. Then basically what we do at div in div, because we have a shock, okay? But we know that the shock is in some sense or in a lot of sense endogenous. The money don't go to the best places. How we control for this div in div, how we create control groups, we combine with propensity score matching. Basically, we find appropriate control groups to make sure that our treat sample is comparable. This means that it's similar pretend, and these guys don't get the money, okay? And finally, we add something, because we are not happy with this, we, following the recent literature, we analyze heterogeneous treatments. This means that not every investment has the same impact, depending on what kind of thing you invest. You have more or less impact. This means that basically we combine 3 different approaches, following, I think that there are many people that have tried something similar, but we adjust here. I think one big contribution here is to use also heterogeneous treatment that only make div in div with propensity score matching. Okay, basically, we use difference in difference. This means that we examine employment outcomes in agricultural, manufacturing, and services between 900 and 2010, because we mix these 2 databases. We have intervention that occurs in the 1940, 1945, and we want to test its effect on the treatment group in the 1950s. We also check for any pre-treatment effects before 1940s. And to ensure that accurate results, we need to find a comparable control. This is a big contribution. We need to get a good control group, okay? Basically, we use a basic div in div, where outcome is the variable of interest in the country I, state G, at the time T, and GRT is a dummy for the years. And we control for a lot of things. We control, for example, we use the total cumulative wartime investment, but we have controls for the year and so on. We have fixed effects, state fixed effects, country time trend, state time trend, error terms, and so on. Basically, we can do a lot because we have thousands of observations, okay? We don't have problems with the number of observations because the United States has a lot of counties, okay? This means our variable of interest is total employment. Basically, we follow Moretti. This means we are worried about the multiplier of employment because it's a data that is much more easy to interpret, okay? And we use this employment separate by different subsectors, okay? Standard errors are clustered at the state level, but if some people are interested, we run, we have a 60-page appendix, then I can send you, because we try all the crazy things that we can do for spatial economics. Okay. What we do with our propensity score matching, that is one of the contributions. We compare this div in div, or control group, the group that we use not treat, is making this way. We make sure that we have a similar group to compare with the response on the investment. No. We observed the distribution of industrial employments in the 1940s, a thin control group of different county classes, whose single counties leads to bias. This means that one of the problems of the previous papers from the beginning, that normally they control for the counties and don't receive the money, but the selection of counties is endogenous. Basically, we try to control the countries for something that are very similar. For example, basically we use two groups of control. When we look for the impact on agrarian countries, we look at the countries that are in the corner, that has less industrial and don't get the money. And when we look for the countries that get the money, we look at the countries that are in the other corner, the 75%, the top countries that get the money, and also the countries that are similarly industrial and similarly developed and don't get the money. This means that we create control groups that are similar. To create the control groups, example, this map shows the countries that we use for agrarian comparisons when we compare if this has an impact in agrarian countries. The next map show what we use for the industrial countries. This means that basically we try to create, like is normal in this exercise, something that is very similar. How we made that? Okay, because it's and also later we make clusters for different technology, but given that the clusters are too small, the clusters are normally compared with the basement industrial group. Okay, we don't have control groups for every different cluster. Okay, good. How we make just the big numbers? We have the observations are 2,799. We don't have Hawaii and Alaska. And basically, the treated is 1,456 countries. This means basically half of the country gets some money. Industrial clusters, basically 76% of the industrial cluster get the money, and much more money get the clusters that are high-tech and medium-tech. Okay, this means that basically what we know is that if we take directly the data, is clearly biased. Okay, the money goes where it should go in some part, but not everybody get the money. There's some part, at least there are 20-something% of industrial clusters that don't get any money at all. This means that not everybody get the money. Okay, what we made is that we get a lot of variables, like is normally in propensity score matching. We use market potential, population density, percentage of urban population, percentage of population above 25 years old, with high school and distance to New York. We experiment with a lot. This is a selection made by the system, and we are use this algorithm that is the caliper matching. We are very demanding. We are going basically very at the end of what we can do, because we have a lot of observations. We have the problem of few observations. And this is one result of the propensity. This table shows what we really get. What we really get is that the first table shows I will go to the next one because I think it's better. If we go to the next table, then it's better because we have the diff in D. If you look at this is the big problem with endogeneity. No? If you compare the treated and not treated group, basically the difference is significant. Okay, basically this means that to make a study with all counties and put 0 and 1, if you have money or not, is highly biased. Instead, when we create the propensity scoring matching, we will have difference between the two groups. That is what we want. Basically, one contribution we are doing diff in diff with these groups, very well selected, but something that is comparable because we use propensity score matching. Okay. Next thing that we do, we look at the heterogeneity of these groups, because one thing that is clearly in the literature is that not every dollar produces the same. We don't think that to spend $1,000 producing, tomato kernels could have the same impact than $1,000 producing aircrafts. And also, it's not the same impact if you spend this money in certain places and not in another. Meaning that we use different levels of technological intensity. We don't decide by ourselves looking at the data what is the technology intensity. We use the last version of the United Nations statistics. Basically, we code everything into this data, and the next table will show you how we code the things. Basically, we have low technology, medium and high technology. This is basically decided by the United Nations about what they interpret could be today high technology. Okay, is basically an anachronism in some sense, but all these kind of investments exist during World War II. Okay, we don't have zeros in this sample. Okay, it's how the United Nations decide this. This means that we not only look at the basic thing that is to look at as a good control group. We not only make diff in diff, but we also look at the at the results, but if we separate by group or different groups, okay, is important. I think that this is very important on our debate, on our research, to be able to separate what is in every group. And if we don't think that every investment has the same impact, okay, what is the results that we get? What is the contribution that we are making? Basically, we run all the deep regressions. We begin for the basic thing is that what happened in the long run between the matched and non-matched sample. This is basically, we compare something that can be compared because it's identical. If you look before 1940, clearly they have the same trend, the panel A, and after another trend, clearly the group that received the money, the treated, grow faster. Okay, they gain much more employment. The panel B is only the difference that show that clearly this happened. Okay, the difference clearly show that this sector is growing faster. Okay, these kind of sectors are growing faster and in total employment. Okay, this means that basically, and also in the long run, that is something that we are worried. But from the 1990s, the difference collapse a bit, but don't disappear. Okay, if we go to agrarian employment, obviously the two decreases are crazy, and surprise for basically the decrease is, as we expect, much more intense where you get money for industrialization because you become less agrarian. I don't stop a lot on this. Later, for us, it's very important what happened, and this is one of the big surprises. What happened with industrial employment? Okay, the data clearly show that the group treated. Okay, what happened in 1950s is this crisis of reconversion that I think that missed many people because we have this process where it is some of these factories should be reconverted and you lost money and basically you close factories. But basically you come back to the same trend in the 1960s, and if you compare the two places, the shock is much more intense in the non-treat group. And later, from the 1980s, in fact, these are the survival industrial district counties of the United States, because the people that have not received this money go down as a crazy. Okay, this means that they lost industrial employment. There are many references about this, but basically what we're saying is that if you get this money in the 40s, in the long run, you are much more resilient to the shocks that has manufacturing employment. And if you look at the comparative statement, it's huge. This means that a lot of the difference is explained by this shock in manufacturing that is quite constant. Okay, this means that basically the sectors, the places that get the money in the long run has much more employment in manufacturing. This is the most simple thing. If you look in trends in services, the shock is not so clear, but we have also these parallel trends. In some moment, if you look at the data, they're also separate. In some moment, this means that in the long run, the places that has manufacturing gain much more service employment. This basically shares with a very famous paper of Enrico Moretti about the multiplier, and the multiplier in tradable translate to creation of jobs in non-tradable sectors, and this is quite clear here. This means that basically we have this shock that has two phases. One phase that is growth in industrial employment, or at least resilience of the sectors, the places, and another is growth in service employment. I repeat, this is possible because we compare a group with a treatment group that is identical from the statistical point of view. Okay, this is not compared with the nation, it's not compared with everybody. Okay, because the selection is endogenous. Okay, we go for one of the big questions. Okay, we take this money and we are a policymaker. Okay, and we say, okay, we are a policymaker, we have a lot of money, we collect this enormous amount of money, and we want to make a really developing policy. Okay, we will take the poorest parts of the country, the South, for example, and we put this money to develop people that are agrarian. This is our specification. We take all the sample, we take one part of our sample, we take only the people that are, by definition, in the 25 lower percentile in industrial employment. Basically, these places are in the South, okay, and distribute across across the United States. And if you look here, nothing happens. Basically, we don't have any significant regression. This is the long run, but I can show you, this is the total effect, but we have by year and so on. Basically, this means that if you invest as a crazy in a place that is agrarian and you put a lot of factories, nothing happens, okay? we have tests, we have a lot of different tests. Basically, we say to the politicians, probably this is not the way to solve the problem of these places. Okay, this is the first conclusion. Now we go faster. We complicate our question, and we look what happened if you invest where you should invest. Okay, what happened if you decided to invest money in a place that is already a high-tech cluster? A place that has these top industries, that is, these industries are concentrated there. What happened in the long run? And happened something very, very interesting. The first thing that in the long run, total employment is positive. This means that basically the impact of the money survived until 2010. Okay, basically the money that you invested in the 1940s is resilient, is there. But if you look in the composition, as you expect, there are decrease in agricultural jobs and a growth in manufacturing jobs. But this growth of manufacturing jobs basically finished in the 1960s, 1970s, and finished to be significant, or is, patchy, because another is 99% and this is 90%, even less. And what basically drives everything is services and tradable services. Okay, we have a sensibility test using only highly skilled, and what happened is that these places that has the money in the 40s, in some moment in the 60s, 70s, 80s, they moved to the service industry. Okay, also this seems rational given that the United States is losing manufacturing. Okay, to me that basically the money has something to do with an internal transformation of these places, and obviously remain until today. Because if you look at this service transformation begins in 1950s. What stops is a lot of the manufacturing transformation. The continuous reduction of agricultural don't stop during all the period. This is what happened in the high-tech clusters. Later, what we call the medium tech. This is what we, in some moment, I can be not, politically correct. This is it will be politically correct. Okay, this is the places that lost forever. It's very interesting. These places, in the medium clusters, the money works in the 1950s, not very well, but basically disappears and has very little impact in the rest of the history. They have some impact. I am not sure if this is significant in 2000, 2010, but basically this is a waste move. Okay, you invest money in a medium tech clusters. For every $1,000 that you invest, you don't get a lot of employment. You get employment that basically collapsed in the 1950s and disappear. This is a money waste in some sense. Okay, this means that this part of money don't go anywhere. Okay, this is a first lesson: if you invest in a not correct cluster, you waste your money. Okay, and finally, the big surprise for us: what happened in the places that are low tech? And this go very well with the paper about the long run thing. Okay, this is the most interesting thing for us and the big surprise. In the low-tech places, you remember these places are specialized in textiles or alimentary industry, something very simple, not very sophisticated, normally with very low wages, okay? And arrive this money from the government, and they begin to have a huge demand for a lot of things. Sometimes they even get money invested in high technology, and basically the place changed a lot. It's a place that wages are really low. This means that for investors, it's a big opportunity. And what we observe, surprise for everybody, is that we have the same impact than in the high-tech clusters. Basically, we have resilience in the impact. Agricultural decrease, but resilience begin much more later. They begin to become strongly industrial, basically from the 1970s and 80s. This is the Sun Belt, where now the industry has moved from the manufacturing belt to the south, is here. It's these counties. Okay, it's these counties that receive money from the government in some moment in the 40s. The economy changed a lot. They have new employment. At the beginning, it's not very efficient, but in the long run, they have these new people with another paper of Klein show basically that these people decided to get educated, and there are much more people going to the high school. And this new generation of people better educated, and this investment had changed the opportunities for these people, translating the long run to a huge growth in manufacturing and services, okay? And this is a big surprise for us. This means that, if you are a policymaker, your life is really complicated, okay? Because, if you invest in an agrarian county, you waste your money. You invest in a high-tech county, obviously, your money is well employed. has impact in the long run, but something changed in the 80s. You invest in a medium tech, you waste your money like in an agrarian country. But if you invest in a low tech country and you change a lot of the country was really different from now. In the long run, it really matters. There are a chance to make regional policies for places that are not exactly the richer, places that are in the middle, the low middle distribution and so on. Okay. We also check how this placed something that geographers, economic geographers like to do. What is the impact in the long run? Where these people come, and if there are externalities. And what we show basically is that in the counties that don't get the money but are close, very close, less than 15 kilometers, become like networks of these counties and also growth. This is very nice. This is basically you extend the size of the cluster to counties that are close, but the counties that are farther and farther and farther, every time loss has less impact or no impact at all. And very important, they lost agrarian population. Basically, what we observe is a kind of movement of people going toward to these new centrality counties. Not only the county that has the shock, but also the counties that are less than 15 kilometers from another county. This means that this is creating what economic geographers are very interested in, is a kind of long-run growth and a change and a increase. Okay, good. In a nutshell, what we get, the first thing that we get, and I think is very important, there are much more than one multiplier. Okay, normally what we calculate when we make papers, we calculate the average multiplier. Okay, and what we are saying is that, okay, there are not a one multiplier, depends on many circumstances. Some circumstances are very difficult to predict, okay, because you imagine you are a policymaker in the 1940s, you really know that a country specialized in metal industry, high metal industry will be a disaster as investment. You feel that it's a good investment. Then we have this. Second is very interesting. You have an investment in manufacturing and you have growth in service sector, like Enrico Moretti multiplier effect. Basically, investment is also interesting because if you invest in these low technology clusters after a generation, you get something. Okay, and this is what Gary and Robban show in the paper about this. No, these people in the low clusters, medium class or low medium class get this money, this enormous government investment, and they get something that is this long-run effect. And obviously, and this bad investment fail in agrarian countries and medium technology cluster. And this is clearly for our data. This disappears. The problem is when you run regressions with everything, you have this mix up and you lost really the effects. Okay, implications. The policy implication is clearly, I think I will make happy a lot of my colleagues in the Department of Geography, of the LSE. Basically, regional policy should be tailored to regional specific characteristics with a focus on each industrial specialization. Okay, we make a test looking for different investment, and this don't really is significant. What really matters is where you invest, not what you invest. This means that you put an air plant factory in an agrarian county, the country will not become industrial. This will fail. If you put a lot of money in this factory, your country will become really industrial. This means that take care with regional policies because basically it's complicated. I think that my colleagues in geography will be happy because I get for them a lot of jobs. Obviously, if we want my general view about what happened is that was the government intervention good for the American economy? Clearly looks yes, was good for the American economy. What has long run positive? Yes, but not for everybody. In fact, this policy increased regional inequality. Okay, because the regions that get this, that are the top regions, grow faster and increase the regional inequality. This means then they don't pretend that. They pretend to win the war, they succeed on that, but clearly they have an unintended consequence on the American economic growth. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you very much for keeping exactly the time. So I now encourage everyone who have questions to type their question in the Q&A box. And in the meantime, I will use my chair's privilege to ask the first question. And I wanted, maybe, I don't know if you want to put your slide up again, because there was a question regarding the figure when you show the treatment effect by distance. Because I was surprised by the result on manufacture, when we see a rise of manufacturing employment with the distance. And so to me, that was slightly counterintuitive. So I wanted to know if you could say a little bit more about that.
Okay, one moment.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, I need to write there. 1 second.
Probably.
Yeah, I get lost. Okay, too much guys here. Yeah, here.
Yes.
Okay, good.
Yes. The figure on the right, I was surprised to see the rise when I would have expected a decline for total employment.
Yeah. This don't surprise me because they are one of my best friends in geography and I write a paper because normally what happens with employment that you have a kind of here the rise is because there are a lot of standard error. It's not a rise. Okay, basically we have it's not significant. What
I had missed.
The people has discovered in economic geography is that there are a kind of cutting point. There are a lot of debate of what far is the cutting point, and some of my friends work on this. And basically, what we know is that this part for the geographers they will say, Joan, this is normal. And basically, what happens is that there one moment that you cannot get the benefit because basically you imagine that you are a company that works for another company. If you are too far, the transport costs eliminate your comparative advantage. Okay, and this is what happened. This is why we have from 150 to 100 kilometers, we have this enormous variation because it's not significant. It's crazy. Okay, there one moment than the people. The important thing here for me is that basically you don't absolutely kill the neighborhoods. Then for us was a surprise because basically this means that surprise now is a very important result because basically means that you have externalities and then you extend your demand outside your core place and not many people get the benefit. Okay, not only the people that has the good luck to live in the correct place. Okay, in the good moment.
I see if we has a question.
Well, actually, I have several, but in the interest of time, let me focus on the historical interpretation, right? So other authors have tried to argue that the aggregate effect of this military spending wasn't really there.
Yeah.
And if it was negative. You're finding very important and persistent local results. So what's the general equilibrium interpretation of all of this? I think you were going there, right, precisely with the discussion with Maylis.
Yeah.
Right. So I understand there was reallocation of economic activity and probably of population, but can you try to make any welfare statement? Was this good for the...
I need to go another part of the paper, that is probably another paper, because again, Enrico Moretti has a nice paper where you calculate aggregate effects, because obviously the aggregate effects are the multiplier of the different individual effects. But the most important thing is the first part, when I look at the aggregate effects and it's consistent, permanent, I think that what we will get probably is a positive aggregate effect. We will not get a negative effect. I think that the waste was not so big to produce a negative aggregate. Clearly, it was a waste of money. Okay, there are money that don't produce anything, but there are a lot of money that produce a lot. This means that in some moment we need to calculate. My impression looking at the data, how much money goes to every place, then if you multiply the money for the people employed and so on, and it's the first part, if you remember, is this graph here. Basically, is positive. Okay, this is the basic, most simple calculation. And basically, you look here, total employment grows in these sectors that are normally geographers use total employment as a shortcut to productivity and GDP. This is basically, we can interpret that in these places the people are much more productive and this is why the people move. This basically say the money is not waste. Without this money, without no money, we will have the second group. This means that less employment growth in the United States. Then clearly is what we are important. This means that when we make the calculation, my expectation is positive. I don't know how much, but should be positive. Okay.
No, I understand. Well, what's remarkable is how persistent this is, right? So clearly some agglomeration effects must have kicked in.
Yeah.
Right? And then the question is, is this welfare enhancing in some sense?
Yeah, because basically what we know is that economic growth from one moment is basically place-based. This means that what you get is these places of the United States forever to be much more productive. obviously the question is the national aggregate get a positive, but we tend to think that yes. The geographers tend to think that yes. Okay, this is not very. For me, I think is no. If you want to say, is one of the first papers which showed this enormous persistence. How much lasts this. For example, here when we look to industrial shock, even in the United States, the China syndrome and the arrival of Chinese, these places are still the sectors with much more industrial employment. They survive to this shock than say a lot about productivity.
Thank you very much. We have a question from sure, but Nathan has a question, so I will give the floor to Nathan now.
Hi, Juan. Thank you for the presentation. So it's good that the slide is on, because this is kind of going back to the debate about the macro impact of this as opposed to the. So I'm thinking about two things. One is a crowding out or crowding in type of argument, where sort of counties where you're in. I mean, so they're otherwise pretty much similar. You invest in one place for some reason, could be completely random. I mean, that would be perfect for your story in terms of identification. And then this employment in this place goes up, but when I look at this figure, it is stagnant in the other places. So apparently, for the U.S. economy as a whole, first you have to look at two things. One is the combined effect of this thing, which is so is it just people moving from one? So one thing to look at, for instance, in terms of looking at this is migration data, whether you see not just increase in employment, but also migration in response to these things. And especially if you export human capital in the sense of brain drain, those kind of things, it's a permanent shock to the exporting county and of human capital. I'm thinking in terms of especially the tech industries. So that could explain the persistence in some sense. Is migration could be working, and it's not that people who lived in those counties now moving from agriculture or doing from being shopkeepers to being working in the industry, but rather some kind of a drain on the other communities through migration. So that's one point. And the other thing is I mean, just for the counterfactual, if you would again continue the pre-war trends. As opposed, I mean, you combine them and look at the pre-war trends, it seems like there was a gap which could have stayed persistent, but overall, again, it's not clear that on a macro level there was any impact didn't have this intervention, that the trends would be parallel but continue in the same way instead of having this bifurcation due to the spending.
Typically, the answer of the economic geographer, and I obviously shared, basically is that you are creating a place that has economies of scale that could be network economies of scale, not necessarily big firms. And this place is much more efficient. And this place, if you locate the activity where it should be located, you grow faster. Because part of the economic growth is to locate activity where you have externalities. Okay? Basically, what this investment do is to self-select these places. Many are self-select already. And if you look at the data in detail, these places are later, some make this transition to the highly tech service sector. They pass from making aircraft to make computers and computer science and to give advice to companies, has finance and so on. And another part, probably one lesson, for me, the huge lesson is that the people that don't get the money, basically can feel in this poverty trap, clearly. Because if you are a worker, and the American economy, the workers are quite mobile, you imagine you are a worker in one of these few clusters that are already high-tech and don't get the money, or your best solution is to move to one of the clusters. Then basically you are replacing. But when you go to this cluster, why you are much more productive and you get higher salaries because you have externalities. You make the cluster bigger and bigger. It's a pro-policy growth, okay? Then don't make everybody happy because, it's not a policy to save the people that has problems. It's a policy that in the long run benefit the people that is much more competitive. This is the secret of them. This is why the Americans win the war and was so efficient producing goods. They don't try to industrialize the South or to put factories in the middle of nowhere to avoid the Germans bombing the place. No, they put the factories in the best place. I think that for colleagues that look at the contracts, they try to win the war and they invest very clearly where they should invest. And this is why they produce economic growth. It's a kind of unintended pro-growth policy. Obviously, with pro-growth policy, you have losers. Okay, and we have a lot of losers here. Basically, the people in the same sector that don't get the money is a loser, clearly, because there are one moment and your factories are smaller, you have less, your salaries are lower and so on. The people that are in sectors that are become obsolete, the medium class, and don't move to anything new, also become a loser. Surprise, surprise, the people that are in sectors that are traditional, but they get this money, they can change. But my impression is here in the aggregate. In the aggregate, the American economy win because you get the economy much more efficient. Given that you invest in places where you should invest, and the government move the money there, not move the money to another places, it's like, it's like a pro-growth policy with a lot of loss. Okay, very strong pro-growth policy. Okay, it's not exactly what you can sustain in a democratic system with people voting. I don't feel that people in the agrarian countries don't be very happy with this policy. Okay, also because the money that they get fail, they don't get anywhere.
Yeah, I mean, if I could just interject here, but I'm just looking at the trends, and it seems like the panel A, so it seems like employment is increasing in the treated as it was before, and in the other ones there. So I don't see like a kink upwards or an acceleration or a spike.
No, basically because this is why if you look at another data, this is total. But if
I'm looking at total, yeah.
If you look to the industrial employment, and I think it's much more strong. Basically, everybody has the shock of the 1950s. If you look at the data, everybody knows about the Korean War shock. And part of the shock is because you make this factory that make tanks. And obviously, if you make tanks, you need to reconvert the factory to make cars in some moment. And this wastes the time. But in the long run, you are here competitive. Another basically lost the ground. You need to remember that in this period, in fact, the United States opened to international markets. And this morning I was talking with my students about the China syndrome. No, basically the economy lost all the manufacturing sector to the Chinese, and these countries that get money in the 1940s don't have the problem. Surprise, surprise. The problem is less acute than in other places.
I mean, just an anecdote. It's not a question. I mean, but compare it to. One of your co-authors knows maybe can work on this, is compared to the Soviet Union. Okay, so they also won the war. They also produced a lot. There was a command economy. And so that would be just an interesting, I mean, at least refer to it because they used, I don't know I don't know which policies they used, but they won the war. They produced a lot of tanks and whatever aircraft. I don't know if more than the U.S. or about the same, but they did something similar within the command economy, which was interesting. It's just a comment on some further research. You could not any comment on this paper.
My expectation is that the Americans are much more endogenous and the Russians are much more endogenous. You remember when they moved to this production to the Urals in the middle of nowhere? This is crazy. This is very expensive. The Americans don't move the production in the middle of nowhere. Basically what they do, you invest where you should invest. And there are people that win the money and people that lose. But it's the people that should win. They don't make a lot of crazy things. Basically, they show that the democratic system works, in some sense, and the decisions are what you should expect. No, I want to win the war. Where I need to put the money? I am not corrupt. I don't give the money to the people that has a lot of political pressure. I really invest in the places that I should invest, and I get something that is for the long run.
Yeah, they probably moved it to the Ural because they were afraid of German bombers. But I'm not sure it was because of corruption. But that's a different story.
Yeah.
Okay, let's give. Now we have a question from the audience. I think Alexandra Irigoyen has a question, so you can now speak, Alexandra. Don't hear you now. Your mic should be on. I think it's not working on our side. So maybe do you want to try typing a question in the Q&A box? I'm really sorry. I was hoping we could hear you live. In the meantime, I will just have a quick question to Juan. I was wondering, you showed that there's a strong transfer effect from the manufacture sector toward the industrial sector, toward the service sector. And I was wondering whether, I believe this is part of the cluster effect, but it was a little bit surprising that I didn't think of sector economy being located in the same spot than kind of the older manufacturing center. So I wanted to ask you if you could say a little bit more about this transfer of skills at the same location in the long run.
I think that I am not, obviously this is not the first paper to say that. There are a lot of papers about these very highly skilled industrial places that move to service sector. For example, something that happened is very interesting. The typical factory in the 40s or 50s has the accounting and all the services into the factory. And there was a moment that they begin to externalize because you have information technology and you have economies of scale. And this externalization tends to happen close to the factories. This is the multiplier effect that Enrico Moretti has so much. There was a moment that these people are so well paid that basically they enter in conflict with manufacturing employment, and the manufacturing employment begins to collapse. Basically, what happened here is that these high-tech clusters make this transition earlier, I think. But there are many people that have written about this, not this specialization. Thorberger has a very interesting paper about cities that specialize in relational functions become successful and cities that specialize in repetitive functions fail. Is more or less the same history, okay? The surprise for us is that it's so clear. No, we don't expect that was so clear, but basically what happened is that you have this big push, and in the next industrial push, you have the transition to a highly technified and competitive service economy, okay?
So I think Alexandra typed part of the question. So I think she wants to, again, follow up on Nathan's point and ask me if you could say, oh, now I think we can hear you, Alexandra.
Thank you. Well, it was a continuation actually of Nathan. Was a bit of what I was thinking. What Nathan launched his question. I think it's interesting. It would be interesting to check for that. But since I have the opportunity to talk, I'm gonna rephrase my question. Have you seen anything? So it's the opposite question. Have you found or seen any effect, differential effect for in the countries that they were geared to produce for the war effort once the war ended, vis-a-vis the countries that were producing for the domestic consumption or the domestic economy?
I think that this is our first graph. You produce for the war effort, and then you get a lot of money, you grow faster. Comparing identical countries, okay? Comparing the control group should be identical. Then basically the war effort paid. Even you have a waste, even you have a factory that produce something that nobody can use later, something happened in your county, and your county has a different employment pattern in the long run, and this survive. Even you produce something that is really stupid, okay? You produce something that, you produce tanks. The consumption of tanks, obviously, in 1950 is a percentage of the previous consumption, and you have produced for this, but you are, in some sense, your economy, your local economy is able to change. And this is the important result. This means that get this money, produce something in the long run. This means that the people that only produce for consumption and don't benefit from this, that is the blue here, the treated zero, they don't have very good long run situation. Why? Because the shop is so huge, then basically you lose a lot of money. If you don't get one of these contracts, your economy will be less productive. You have less firms. The firms will be bigger. The people that get the money get so much money that they change the economy forever.
But I mean, for the sort of, you were thinking about policy advice and so on. So the investing in manufacturing for the war effort made a difference, but the sort of the closing of that or the end of it, it doesn't make any difference.
Not forever. It's the idea that the people are very worried is that, for example, in the European Union, you take and give, 1 billion euros to one region in Germany, what will produce? And it's like this. No, you give a huge contract to a region in Germany to produce cars, electric cars. What could happen? And what we show here is that if you give the money to the correct region, you produce a lot. If you give the money to a region that is not correct, you don't produce anything, and give the money for something that they don't produce. But if you give the money to a very medium-class place and there's some industrial expenditure, in the long run, not immediately, you can produce something. And this is the big surprise of what we observe. We don't have one elasticity. Where you use the money is important. Okay, is if you use the money in a stupid place, if you invest in an agrarian county in the middle of the South, you don't produce anything. You waste your money. Obviously, they fulfill the contract, but this industry will not survive because the county don't have the characteristic to survive in the long run. Probably, I don't know what the characteristic, but they have is far from everywhere. They have the population and so on. Okay.
Let me just interject here because we are reaching the top of the hour. So I want first to thank everyone for joining. We will continue the discussion in a more informal way for another 15 minutes, but if you have to leave now, thank you for joining us. The next session of the seminar would be on May 8th, 24, with Osama Kawar from the University of Florida, presenting a paper on the Glass-Steagall Act and bank shock market speculation. So I hope to see you all then. But we have still 15 minutes for more informal discussion here. So I think we had a long list of questions. I don't know if Alexandra, you want to answer to
No. I can.
Okay.
I mean, let's take questions from other people. I can tease Joan another day. We're seeing each other. But I still want the counterfactual of your demand. We will clear this at some point, Joan. No problem. But thank you very much.
Thank you, Alexandra. So Rui, I think we have sometimes you have more questions for Juan.
Yeah. I'm afraid my questions are just nitpicking. I have to say, right? Diff and two-way fixed effects regressions are very well known, right? So I have my standard questions, right? So in the paper you mentioned that you use both continuous and binary treatment, but I didn't understand if the pictures, especially the treatment effects pictures you showed.
Yeah, because at the beginning I used the binary to simplify everything, and later we used the 1000 thing, that is better. But we have this appendix I need to select because Alex is a crazy man and works hard, and he tests everything 25 times. We have this nice paper of 60 pages with everything. We ever thinking to do much more sensibility tests, but in some moment you need to stop to do sensibility tests.
Yeah.
This is not recorded, no? I can say
to the referees. No. Yeah, but I just wanted to check, right? Because there's all this debate whether diff and diff with continuous treatment is even interpretable, right?
Yeah, I know. And we tried a lot of different things. I tried quartiles, basically we do whatsoever we can do. The problem is that for a presentation, make everybody crazy.
No. It's I just didn't hear it, so I wanted to check that.
So let me just ask the question that is sitting on the Q&A. The question from Matteo Salto, who's asking if you could say a little bit more or follow up on when you said why resilience to Chinese competition was surprising for you, because China's choice of the sector in which to enter was endogenous. They chose the weak sector clearly. So Matteo will presume that the sector where the beneficiary countries developed are the most advanced. So you can read in the question in the Q&A if needed, or we can ask Matteo for clarification if needed.
Basically, to follow the paper of outdoor cats and all the China syndrome that now is very popular after all the tests on the instruments, then basically they say that you have the China shock and a manufacturing employment collapse across the United States because they are not competitive. And I again, if I can repeat the author paper, probably will check, depending on what, okay? Depending on your specialization and so on, I think that not every place on the United States get the shock in the same way. I suppose on places that are, a lot of this middle class that I observed and everything fails, a lot is with this, the China syndrome, the international shocks and so on. The people that are in the streams, you think now in the States, you think in the Sun Belt is not have a bad history now. In fact, it's very successful one. It's these guys that are specialized because are not very expensive in terms of salaries, are competitive, are in a place that is really cheap. The people that suffer a lot is the manufacturing belt. Alex, Nick Kraft and Alex Klein has written 3 or 4 papers about this. And I think that this is the China syndrome, the big shock. China go to these guys directly, and not the other guys that are much more competitive and basically survive. And I think that we get is the confirmation of this with the data. It's nothing unexpected. Okay, it was unexpected for us when we get at the beginning, but now I think, yeah, this is what happened. If you look at the data today, if you look at the map of the states, the places where there is still American manufacturing is these places. The other places or has moving to highly skilled services or has moving to another thing. But the most important result here is that it's a lot before the China scene. You know, it begins in the 60s, 70s, begins with a lot of changes and so on. Nico has a very nice paper about the impact in Europe of the transition from coal to oil in industrial production, and probably is worth exploring what will happen at the States, but this is a different paper. I think what we get is this history of these guys benefit from this money, and they use in a productive way that is to become industrial. The industrial places benefit this money to become not industrial, and the places in the middle are the guys that suffer, you know, the middle class.
Thank you. We have another question in the Q&A by Michael Uberman, who's asking whether you can ask a Canadian question, which is, there are a lot of activities in northern states, and how do you deal with border spillovers regarding employment?
I think that we check for spillovers here because we check for shocks, but clearly I expect that a lot of the middle class is places that historically we think that are spillover places. And these places don't survive. Basically, we don't get any spillover in these places. We get zero. One thing that we want to do that we have not already done is to do the regression by distance, by type of investment, because it could be different. You know, there are kinds of production that don't have a lot of spillovers because transport cost is too much. Then you cannot spill over the factory in many places, and you don't have manufacturing shocks or around. We need to check this, but clearly the data here show that the money that you invest in these places was so difficult to convert in anything else that is bad and so on. This is the problem of the North. Then probably, you know, the North was not specialized. We need to do a paper that is much more a geographer paper, explaining where the money go with a map and the different places. But I think that they have somewhere a map where it was the high-tech, low-tech. Here, this map I will share. You can share. Yeah.
We don't see the slides right now.
Yeah, let me do if I can share. You can share somewhere.
I think.
Yeah, share screen. Share, yeah, because I was not sharing. Yeah. If you look at this map, high-tech industries are a lot in places that you don't expect. That is the California and Seattle and so on. If you look here, in some parts of the North, but many of the North is medium tech clusters. And this is the guys that suffer. If you look in terms of geography, these places suffer a lot. This means that this explains a lot of the. We are thinking to make a paper like these papers that there know about Brexit vote, about the vote for Trump. Then I think is highly correlated. Not this county vote for Trump probably is hugely correlated with places that are industrially successful. They get the money, but they don't get anything, and in the long run disappears. I do feel that basically the money is a question of technology. This technology is no longer competitive and don't have economies of scale, and you can invest on that. You probably are, and Alex has a very nice idea, and probably in medium tech, you are basically in the frontier, and if you put much more money here, you cannot go further. Because, you know, it's a waste. And you are not already in the frontier in the high-tech cluster, and you can grow in these high-tech clusters. And then the production in these sectors, you know, is probably the United States has arrived to the frontier. They cannot put much more money. And to make the things worse is where the Japanese and the Chinese and the competitors enter. Okay,
I actually had like one follow-up question on the high-tech versus low-tech segregation, because in the paper you mentioned you use a UN classification, but I was wondering whether it was easy for you to match that classification with 1940s industry in the US, because I mean, I guess you may have to have done some choices, and so I was wondering if you could say a little bit more about this ranking of technology that you had to do.
What the documents say, we allocate. When we are not sure, we distribute the film in different sectors. But was not, I don't know, I don't make this was made by Alex, but I feel that he spent a lot of time, but we don't have many middle people than in 2 sectors or something. It was not so difficult. Basically, because in some moment, if you look at the classification, I think that the big problem with the classification is, wait, one moment, I have somewhere the classification. Methodology. The classification, where is one moment, because I will show you the sectors that are problematic. But we don't have so much problem. I think that was because also was big categories. You know, you look here. The nice thing is that they put in some moment they put there the United Nations put in the category. What is much more complicated for us is that other transport equipment except ships and boats that make our life very easier, because basically it's everything. Motor vehicles is everything. Machinery and equipment, then is the small, is the electrical and so on. It's not very complicated. What they put here is weapons and ammunition. This is very important for us. This is why in one regression we control for currently expenditure of the government in this, okay? Because we know that the American government spend a lot in the army, and we need to control for this. But they immediately, this is high tech for the United Nations. We don't have a lot of problems because it's big categories. We don't go very small things, and also the groups are very big, okay? This means that we don't have a lot of, also very interesting, the contracts are very clear. They don't ask to one guy make the bags and another guy make for example, they separate the production. They don't ask to one guy, you make the bags and into what you produce into the bags, not happen. There are one guy making the bags, another guy making what is into the bags that make our life better. Okay.
And when you fix the group is fixed throughout time, or do you? Alexandra is also asking, like, are there changes in the number of location of contis across the categories over the years?
Now it's very simple because basically the American data can be converted to they have a file that convert one thing to another. Will make our life easier. We don't need to do anything with the current data. Basically, what we do, we type the American census, the different versions, and automatically the UNIDO data pick up data file. You know, I don't know if I think that in some moment we make automatically because it was too much observation. Okay, but it's very simple. There are people that has done for us. This means that it's not a big problem.
I guess the question was whether one conti would change of a category across time, or is it just stable throughout the whole long term?
What we decided is to make an anachronic assertion, and is to take the recent category and use forever. Okay, the people can discuss is basic metals, is medium technology. I don't know. Probably could be high technology in the 1920s. But we use the anachronism for today because we are looking to the impact today. Okay, this is why it's so simple. It's not. I don't say that ships and boats was not high technology in the 1940s, but now it's not high technology according to the United Nations, the group that has created this.
Okay, so we might have. I don't know if you're like a 1 minute question you want to ask, or we can just.
I can ask it in 1 minute, but I don't think Juan can answer it. Which is, the obvious problem with propensity score matching is unobservables, right? So you don't know whether you're actually identifying what you claim or whether that's confounded by unobservable, especially if they're spatially autocorrelated, right? For an economic geographer, I would expect you to have told me something about spatial autocorrelation, but you decided not to. Or you can frame this as a possible violation of sattva. Right? Can you actually
claim? It's very funny because if you read the economic geographers of the department close to me, they think that the problem with the spatial autocorrelation is that you assume a relation between the variables and you don't have a model to explain that.
I know. That's the Overman paper. But my perhaps positive suggestion here, right? So these were works board, right? So they doled out these contracts, but I'm sure they also kept an archive.
Yeah.
I'm hoping that they sat down in writing what were their priorities for investing. why they would choose location A relative to location B.
Yeah.
But they're trying to get all of this through the canned method of having a propensity score matching, right? The treated and treated and have enough overlay and so on. But actually, you may be missing out the actual historical information that tell you what their priorities were.
Because basically, these very nice guys wrote Snyder and Strom, give when they run a regression with the determinants of investment, and they look that is economically, and they look basically some variables than we use.
I know, but I'm actually what I'm suggesting is check if this works kept an archive, because frequently they did, and they had a checklist. This is the characteristics we require, right, to send federal money to produce whatever.
I think that what they do,
so you actually can get the data from the historical sources rather than inferring them from a potentially misspecified first stage in your propensity score match. But we don't have time, so I'll just leave it.
So thank you for the final suggestion. Thank you everyone for staying for this second part. It was a very, I think, fun discussion. And so again, the IMOS seminar reconvene on May 8th for a discussion on the Glass-Steagall Act. So looking forward to that. And in the meantime, thanks everyone and have a good rest of your day.
Thank you.
Lovely.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.